After getting engaged, I went to my fiancé's house for the Christmas Eve gathering. Because I couldn't understand their regional dialect, we had agreed long ago to communicate in Mandarin when we were at his hometown. Unexpectedly, as soon as I walked in, Aunt Susan's son cursed at me in the regional dialect, calling me an ugly, money-grubbing slut. I was stunned. My future Mrs. Miller, thinking I couldn't understand, led everyone in laughter. Just as I was about to blow up, I realized that my fiancé, Sean Miller, was also snickering. When he caught my eye, Sean Miller stopped smiling and pushed me, 10 weeks pregnant, into the kitchen, claiming I was there to help Mrs. Miller. But I didn't see Mrs. Miller until I finished cooking the multi-course meal by myself. Just as I was about to go out and ask Sean Miller to bring the dishes, I overheard the conversation in the living room. "Our Tommy is so great. He gave his aunt-in-law a real dressing down right away. Did you see her stupid face when she couldn't understand? Ha ha ha, I'm dying of laughter. She's ugly and dumb. Speaking of which, son, have you asked her for the password to her bank account yet? The betrothal gift has been with her for over half a year. Why haven't you gotten the money back yet? I'm telling you, take the money back while she's pregnant and not thinking straight. It's $60,000. I don't trust leaving it in the hands of an outsider. Don't worry, Mom, I'll get the password out of her sooner or later." "You're right, Mom, that money can't be left with a woman. You don't know how lavish Joanne Miller is. She even bought the new house the other day. Is the house in your name?" Sean Miller curled his lip, picked up his sister's son, and slipped him a thick red envelope. "No, she refused to put my name on it, saying it's her prenuptial property." Sean Miller's sister, Sarah Miller, rolled her eyes, took the red envelope from her son, and opened it, beaming. "She's quite the schemer, no. As how to calculate." Sean Miller didn't retort. They were all speaking in the regional dialect, and I couldn't understand everything, so I could only guess based on what I could understand. "Exactly, I'm still holding my breath about it. Luckily, our Tommy gave her a hard time just now, ha ha ha." They remembered my stunned and ridiculous expression when I entered, and burst into laughter again. I felt a surge of anger. I had shared my plan to buy a prenuptial house with him long before we got engaged. At the time, he had repeatedly agreed, saying it was adding security for myself, and he praised me for being smart and independent. I didn't expect that now, he would be the one with the biggest smile in the living room and the most concerned about it. Mrs. Miller suddenly slapped her thigh a few times. "Oh my! What's the meaning of this? Buying a house and not putting your name on it, but putting it in the woman's name, isn't that deliberately making you lose face? But then again, have you asked her where the money for the house came from? She wouldn't have spent all $60,000 from the betrothal gift, would she?" Her tone was harsh, like a sharp thorn to everyone's ears. I stared intently at Sean Miller, hoping he would react in some way, even if it was just to say a word for me. After all, this was our first Christmas Eve/Christmas Eve gathering after our engagement, and the first time I had dinner at their house. We had been dating for 4 years and 6 months and engaged for half a year. Sean Miller couldn't possibly not know what kind of person I was. My family's financial situation was better than his. When we went to deposit the betrothal gift at the time of our engagement, I deposited it as a 2-year fixed deposit in front of him. Because we had agreed to get our marriage certificate and hold our wedding in 2 years, at which time I would take out the money and deposit it again as a fixed deposit. Ever since I found out I was pregnant, I had also made it clear to him that when the time came, I would deposit the money in our daughter's name. At the time when I said these things, Sean Miller had no objections, not even a hint of displeasure. After Sean Miller not only didn't refute but immediately changed his expression, I felt as if I had been hit by a sledgehammer. His silence made the atmosphere in the living room freeze instantly. Mrs. Miller took the lead in gathering the relatives together, and the words she said were even more unbearable. Some people suggested that Sean Miller find a way to get the betrothal gift money back. Some people told him to coax me into adding his name to the new house, and then divorce me after I gave birth, so that he could get at least half of the money for buying the house. Others told him to neglect me while I was pregnant and couldn't leave. Women, if they don't listen, you have to tame them, let them know that you are the one in charge. Your sister is right. If you want to control a single daughter from New York, with money and connections, you have to force her to lower her bottom line step by step. After they finished discussing, they finally noticed me standing at the kitchen door. The living room suddenly went silent, and everyone looked at each other. Mrs. Miller and Sean Miller's faces turned white and red. Mrs. Miller quickly put on a smile and waved her hand casually at the relatives, still speaking in the regional dialect. It's okay, she can't understand the regional dialect, she can only understand Mandarin. Have you forgotten how stupid she looked when she couldn't understand what Tommy said when she first came in? I clearly saw Sean Miller and the others breathe a sigh of relief. Hey! Let me tell you something even funnier. Before my son brought this girl back, she told him to tell the family to communicate in Mandarin. Aunt Susan's son, Tommy, raised his hand and spat the candy in his mouth onto the table, leaving a blob of saliva. I can speak Mandarin. Mrs. Miller quickly covered his mouth and instructed everyone in the regional dialect. Oh my darling, who can't speak Mandarin? But why should we listen to her and communicate in Mandarin? It just so happens that we can use this to test this girl's character. If she makes a fuss here or throws a tantrum with her man when she gets back, then she's not a good person, she's petty and small-minded. Aunt Susan quickly chimed in. That's right. Why should we speak Mandarin when we're talking to our own family? It's too formal. Only Sean Miller is silly. Otherwise, your mom and I would say she's a slut who seduces men. Look at how infatuated you are with her. You listen to everything she says. As they spoke, the 7 or 8 people in the living room glanced at me from time to time, trying to observe the expression on my face. Sean Miller smiled sheepishly, then realized that he hadn't offered me anything. He brought over a cup of tea that had already been drunk and was now cold. Is the food ready? You worked hard, honey. I looked at him with mixed feelings, feeling very uncomfortable. To be honest, I didn't want to believe that he was two-faced. After all, he had always been very good to me for the past 5 years, and our values were very compatible. But I had just seen his other side very clearly. I suppressed my emotions, took a deep breath, and pushed down the frustration in my heart. Yeah. What were you all talking about just now? You seem to be having so much fun. I sized up Sean Miller's expression, but his expression and movements didn't show the slightest flaw. Nothing. I stood there feeling annoyed. Perhaps sensing my low mood, Sean Miller put down the plate and walked over to me. He put his arm around me and kissed me on the forehead. Are you angry? I'm sorry, honey. I know you worked hard to cook this multi-course meal. I promise this is the last time. It just so happened that my mom's back was hurting today, and she wanted to rest, so she forgot about the kitchen. He smiled sheepishly. Then what were you talking about just now? Didn't we agree to communicate in Mandarin? Sean Miller scratched his head a little embarrassedly. We weren't talking about anything. My sister and them are seeing you for the 3rd time, and they said you look even prettier than before. Hey, I told my mom about this, but you also know that my parents are old and have never left the rural area/countryside in their lives, so they can only speak the regional dialect. I'm sorry, honey, I've wronged you. How about your husband be your translator later? Looking at the man I had loved for 5 years, I still chose to believe him this once. Maybe I really did guess their words wrong and misunderstood what they meant. After the food was on the table, Mrs. Miller arranged the seats one by one. Dad Miller, as the oldest person in the family, sat at the head of the table. Mrs. Miller naturally sat next to him, with Aunt Susan's family opposite. Next was Uncle Robert's family, and Uncle Ben was a quiet man. Sean Miller said that since he divorced his wife 2 years ago, he had gone to drifting in California, or a similar major state, alone, leaving his 2 children at home to be taken care of. However, Mrs. Miller didn't like Uncle Robert's ex-wife, and she didn't like the 2 children either. In short, from the time I entered the house until now, the 3 of them had been silent, with fake smiles on their faces. After that was her husband, and I was arranged in the most remote corner. The table was a large rectangular table, with the beef stew in the very center, farthest from me. The other appetizers and meat dishes were all placed in front of Dad Miller, Sean Miller, and Aunt Susan, while the only things in front of me were a few plates of vegetables and meatballs that would be used for the hot pot later. Joanne Miller, you are the new bride in our family. Our custom here is that the new bride vs everyone at her first family meal after the engagement and marriage. Look at the dishes in front of you. You'll be in charge of putting them in the pot later, and you'll also be in charge of pouring the 2 bottles of liquor next to you. This was the first sentence Mrs. Miller said to me in Mandarin. I understood all the words, but I couldn't figure out what she meant when they were put together. Sean Miller touched his nose and forced a smile at me. I'm sorry, honey, I forgot to tell you when we came. Just treat it as you and the baby in your belly are greeting the relatives, okay? I hesitated a little, and then remembered what my parents had told me before I left. The first time you go to someone's house for Christmas Eve/Christmas Eve gathering, you have to be observant. The customs for eating are different everywhere, so do as the Romans do. I hesitated for a while, nodded, and then stood up to pour the liquor. Dad Miller was a drunkard, and he drank the liquor in his cup very quickly. Every time I sat down, he would cough twice to remind me to go over and pour him liquor. After a busy time, I didn't eat a few bites of food, but my lower abdomen was aching from exhaustion. I finally had a moment of peace, but I didn't want to reach for the dishes. Sean Miller's family was chatting happily, laughing loudly from time to time. I tugged on Sean Miller's sleeve. I can't reach the dishes. Sean Miller then realized that he hadn't gotten any food for me. He picked up a few pieces of meat for me. I'm sorry, honey, it's my fault. I was careless for a moment. I shook my head. When the hot beef stew, coated in spicy oil, entered my mouth, I felt alive again. At that moment, they didn't know what they were talking about, but they all turned their heads to look at me and laugh. I awkwardly put down my chopsticks and laughed along with them. I had only been paying attention to eating just now and hadn't noticed the topic of conversation at the table. 4-2. Innately, Sean Miller took the initiative to pick up the topic and translated it for me in Mandarin. It's okay, just eat. Mom and Dad are happy to see you eating so heartily. The bad mood that had been neglected earlier improved a little. Seeing this, Sean Miller picked up another piece of chicken for me. As the meal was coming to an end, Mrs. Miller suddenly came over and pulled me up. The shrimp that I was about to put in my mouth fell back into the bowl. This was the first shrimp in my bowl tonight, but I didn't even taste it. Mrs. Miller smiled and put her hand under my clothes and rubbed my lower abdomen. The cold hand touched my lower abdomen, causing me to shiver and involuntarily take a few steps back. The stabbing pain in my lower abdomen came back. I smiled awkwardly and looked at Sean Miller for help. Sean Miller squeezed my hand, as if to comfort me. Don't worry, Mom is just happy and wants to touch her grandson in advance. Sean Miller's joking tone made me feel as if I couldn't breathe. I could only stand there stiffly, not knowing whether to retreat or not. Then, Aunt Susan's son came over and reached out his hand. He looked at me, his hands greasy with rice between his fingers. Aunt-in-law, I want to touch my little brother too. Before I could speak, Mrs. Miller grabbed his hand with a smile and reached into my clothes. I was startled and instinctively hid behind Sean Miller. Seeing this scene, Mrs. Miller and Aunt Susan's faces immediately turned cold. Aunt Susan looked at me and took a sip of liquor. "Mom, my little brother's wife is really delicate. You can't even let a child touch her." "Oh well, after all, our Tommy doesn't have that blessing and isn't worthy of being close to the baby in her belly." I opened my mouth to explain, but didn't know what to say. I looked up at Sean Miller, but found that his expression wasn't very good either. I bit the bullet and waved my hand. "It's not like that, Aunt Susan, Before I could finish speaking, Sean Miller squeezed my palm and signaled me not to speak. Aunt Susan snorted, walked over, pulled Tommy away from me, and spoke Mandarin in a deliberately gentle voice. "Come here, Tommy, remember, the baby in your aunt-in-law's belly isn't someone you can get close to. They look down on us." "What does Mom usually teach you to do when people look down on us?" The little boy's expression instantly turned fierce, staring at me in a way that made me feel uneasy. "Curse her! Swear at her! People who look down on us are all black-hearted bastards. They're all rotten trash who've lost their parents." The dissatisfaction in my heart could no longer be suppressed, and my fingers were trembling with anger. "How can you talk like that? Is that how Aunt Susan usually teaches children? Where's your manners and upbringing?" Aunt Susan's emotions were a little out of control. She quickly stepped forward and even raised her hand. "Who are you calling rude and uncultured? Say it again if you dare." I pursed my lips unhappily. Could she really dare to hit me? Just as I was about to retort, Sean Miller tugged my sleeve hard. His voice was a little low, or perhaps he only said this to me. "Enough, Joanne Miller. Why are you making such a scene on Christmas/New Year? Why are you arguing with a child? Apologize to Aunt Susan right now." I looked at him in disbelief. Why should I apologize? Didn't you hear how her son just cursed at me? Sean Miller leaned close to my ear. "Please, honey, just do it for my sake, okay?" I laughed in anger. I didn't understand his actions, nor did I understand his train of thought. My chest was heaving violently with anger, and he was still asking me to bow my head to his sister. "Sean Miller, haven't I given you enough face since I walked in?" Seeing that I was really getting angry, Sean Miller quickly turned around to appease Aunt Susan's emotions. Seeing this, Dad Miller slammed his liquor glass hard on the table. After a muffled sound, everyone silent. "All right. Why are you making a fuss during the Christmas/New Year? Sean Miller, control your own wife and tell her not to talk nonsense. This is what happens the first time she comes to our house for Christmas Eve/Christmas Eve gathering. What a disgrace." Although he was speaking in the regional dialect, his pronunciation was clear, and I could roughly understand it. Just as I was about to retort, Sean Miller reluctantly pulled me back to my seat. The atmosphere at the table became lively again. On days like Christmas Eve/Christmas Eve gathering, even if something made everyone feel unhappy, it would soon be dispelled by the idea of to bring good luck for the new year. Sean Miller flattered me by putting a lot of food in my bowl, but I couldn't bring myself to eat the shrimp in my bowl. The frustration in my heart never dissipated, and then Mrs. Miller came over and grabbed me. I glared at her, but before I could explode, she stuffed a bottle of liquor into my arms. Because of the unsteady movement, some liquor spilled on my white down jacket. Mrs. Miller didn't care at all. She told me to make toasts to everyone. Here, the new bride only gets a gift card/cash gift in an envelope if she makes toasts. Of course, this is only this one time. Go ahead, start with your dad. Mrs. Miller pushed me to Dad Miller. The stabbing pain in my lower abdomen was getting more and more obvious. All I wanted to do now was to end this dinner as soon as possible. Forcing a smile, I raised my liquor glass. Uncle, Happy New Year. I wish you good health and all the best. Then, a $50 bill was stuffed into my pocket. He didn't even bother to put the money in a red envelope. He was still muttering, "You're engaged and pregnant and you're still calling me uncle. I don't know how your parents taught you. You were born but not raised." I was so angry that my chest was heaving, but Sean Miller was still calmly translating for me. Dad said thank you for your blessing and wishes you more beauty and a smooth delivery in the future. My voice trembled, and I asked him uncertainly, "Are you sure that's what Dad said?" Sean Miller nodded, his expression frank. "Of course!" He didn't notice that the thumb he was making with his other hand had already been seen by me. Aunt Susan's voice was excited, urging me to quickly make a toast to her. I gritted my teeth and walked over. "You bitch, you slut. You dare to curse my son. I bet the baby in your belly will be born dead." I stared at Sean Miller, my eyes red with anger, but he could still conjure up a smile even when others were cursing his son to die. "Aunt Susan says we're a match made in heaven and wishes us happiness." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I bit my lower lip in heartache. When it was Mrs. Miller's turn, she started cursing even before I could speak. "You black-hearted slut, you dare to curse my good nephew. I think you're tired of living. You look pretty decent, but who would have thought you'd have such a black heart? If you weren't carrying my Sean Miller's child, I wouldn't be smiling at you. I wouldn't give you a smile. You rotten piece of trash. Give my son the betrothal gift money I gave you sooner. If you dare to use it, I'll tell my son to beat you to death. Anyway, when you get your marriage certificate and get married, a husband can discipline his disobedient wife and no one can say anything. My son's conditions are so good, he can just marry someone better." Her stinky saliva sprayed all over my face. "Enough is enough. Endure it for a while and they'll climb all over you. Take a step back and you'll get breast nodules and hyperplasia." My slap landed on everyone's ears before Sean Miller could translate. Everyone was stunned by my actions. The liquor glass in my hand was thrown out and smashed against the wall, shards and liquor splattering everywhere. I kicked over the chair next to me, lifted one side of the table, and dishes and bowls flew everywhere. Aunt Seuss and son was so scared by my actions that he wet his pants and stood there crying. I turned to look at Sean Miller and slapped him twice to vent my anger. Seeing her son being beaten, Mrs. Miller bared her teeth and claws and rushed over to push me. "You murderer! How dare you hit my son?" Dad Miller sat in front of the overturned table, liquor and soup all over him, so angry that he rolled his eyes. "Unbelievable! Unbelievable! Sean Miller! This is the good wife you married." Sean Miller was also angry. He pulled me hard, and the blood rushed to his head, causing the veins on his forehead and neck to bulge. "Are you crazy? Do you know what you're doing?" Seeing that I didn't care, he clenched and unclenched his fists in anger. "Apologize to everyone, and clean up this place." I found it a little funny and shook off his hand. "Me apologize? What am I apologizing for? I cooked the multi-course meal, but I didn't even get a bite of shrimp. You were all happy eating and chatting, as if I were sold to your house as a slave." Aunt Susan was busy coaxing her son, while stirring up the fire. Now they all used Mandarin to communicate with me. Isn't it right for a daughter-in-law to come to her in-law's house and cook in the kitchen? Don't you have any filial devotion? I sneered. She didn't give birth to me, she didn't raise me, she's not kind to me, and she doesn't respect me. Why should I have any filial devotion towards her? Mrs. Miller pushed me, her expression fierce. "I went through all the hardships to give birth to Sean Miller and let you pick up a bargain and get such a good husband. Aren't I kind to you? I shouldn't have let Sean Miller marry you in the first place. I didn't expect you to be this kind of person. You have no manners." I pushed back without backing down. You should keep this kind of man who doesn't protect his wife at the bottom of the box. I'm afraid no one will want him even if you take him out. Who has no manners? Your whole family is. Truly rude and uncultured. Sean Miller, if I had known that the person you were for the past 5 years and before we met your parents was all an act, I would never have agreed to your proposal. Sean Miller's expression changed, and he immediately pulled me into his arms. Don't say such angry words, Joanne Miller. I know you're upset about cooking, not understanding the regional dialect, and arguing with my sister, but can we talk about these things when we get back? You know, my parents are from the rural area/countryside, and some things have really been done to the extreme. If you're not satisfied or unhappy, I'll teach them properly later, okay? I admit that my eyes were red with anger, but it was also because I was angry that I was particularly rational and calm. Before the engagement, my parents had never really liked this guy from the countryside. They felt that although he was very motivated and responsible, and seemed to be a very hardworking, sensible, and perfect man, he was actually covered in a veil. That veil was a disguise to prevent us from seeing the essence of his heart. The magnetic field of feeling between people is very wonderful. They didn't like Sean Miller from the first time they met. But Sean Miller and I had a very good relationship. We met in college, and in the process of getting along, I found that his values and temperament were very compatible with mine, so we fell in love over time. With my insistence, my parents finally gave in. Looking at Sean Miller, who was trying to appease my emotions, apologizing in a low voice, and putting himself in the position of the victim, I sadly realized for the first time that I had never really seen this man clearly in the past 5 years. I even wondered if I had come to his house for Christmas/New Year or a holiday before the engagement, would I have been able to get out sooner? Thinking of this time when I went back to my in-laws' house for dinner, in order not to cause trouble for Sean Miller, I even found someone to learn the regional dialect here. It's really ridiculous. Sean Miller, your parents are from the rural area/countryside and I am from the city, so you took advantage of the fact that I couldn't understand the regional dialect to condone your mom's language isolation and glorify your family's verbal abuse of me, right? Sean Miller looked terrified, and even Mrs. Miller took a few steps back unconsciously, looking at me suspiciously. You can understand? I pulled the corners of my mouth in a mocking smile and stepped out of Sean Miller's arms. If I couldn't understand, and I happily accepted your family's curses as blessings, wouldn't I be doomed this year? Mrs. Miller was so shocked that she stuttered. Then, you understood all those words? Even though what I learned wasn't comprehensive, I could be sure that I didn't hear or guess a single word wrong. Sean Miller pursed his lips and told me to listen to his explanation. I looked at him with disappointment. Sean Miller, I think we should reconsider our marriage. He looked at me with trembling lips in disbelief, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. What do you mean? Just because of what happened today, you don't want to marry me? My heart ached dully. My feelings for Sean Miller were real. What happened today might not lead us to break up, but I couldn't imagine what it would be like if we really got married in the future. Sean Miller wanted to say something, but Mrs. Miller pulled him behind her. If you don't want to marry, then don't marry. Look at your potential. Your conditions are so good. Are you afraid you won't be able to find a wife who's 1,000 times better than her? Joanne Miller, I'll tell you, it's your bad luck if you don't marry my son. Do you think you're some kind of popular girl and my son is some kind of homeless man who has to chase after you? Go out there and ask the neighboring towns, ask them if anyone has a daughter-in-law like you has no manners and doesn't know what's important? Aren't you just relying on the baby in your belly? So what? You think you're a delicate young lady just because you're pregnant? You can't lift a finger, and you can talk about cooking a meal for so long. I haven't even said that you wasted my money on groceries by cooking the food like that. You can turn a few $100s worth of food into cheap goods fried with sewage and gutter oil. I'm afraid you're the only one in the world who can do that. I'm telling you, if you don't want to marry, then don't marry. Anyway, I'm not the one with the big belly. We'll see who begs whom in the end. But don't say I didn't warn you. Don't even think about remarrying with my son's seed, or I'll come knocking and make sure your whole family never has a day of peace. Aunt Susan chimed in. Yeah, so what if your family has a little bit of money? What's the big deal? Acting like you're too good for us. I bet she's just throwing a fit because she thinks the gift card/cash gift in an envelope mom and dad gave her wasn't enough. You've got some nerve, an outsider, daring to smash plates and bang on tables in our Miller house. Dad Miller and Aunt Susan's husband agreed with Mrs. Miller, pressuring Sean Miller to make a decision. Sean Miller was caught in the middle, torn between two sides. Finally, he looked at me, a determined glint in his eyes. Joanne Miller, apologize to my family and clean up this mess, and we'll forget about it. Today was supposed to be your first meal at my house after our engagement, and it's Christmas Eve/Christmas Eve gathering. You've already been very inconsiderate making such a scene. Otherwise, the hope I was clinging to finally died. I wiped away tears, looking at him with a broken heart. Otherwise, what? Sean Miller didn't respond, but Mrs. Miller glared at me dismissively. Otherwise, we just won't get married, we'll drag it out. We can afford to wait, but can you? She glanced pointedly at my stomach. The baby is almost 3 months along, probably already starting to take shape. Your belly is getting bigger every day, and we're not the ones who can't afford to wait. I heard Sean Miller say that you're parents and you treat the baby in your belly like it's the most important thing. Leaving aside whether you'd be willing to abort, your physical condition, you probably couldn't handle a late-term abortion, could you? I sneered. So that was their plan. But their calculations were about to backfire. Sean Miller was right, my parents did value the baby in my belly. Not because they had any affection for it, but because they were worried about my health. I was a single daughter from New York, with money and connections, and my health hadn't been great since I became an adult. I'd been dealing with anemia on and off for years, and with prolonged blood deficiency, my parents were worried that my body couldn't handle providing nutrients for both me and the fetus. That's why they were so concerned and took such good care of me after I got pregnant. I never imagined that Sean Miller and Mrs. Miller would see all this as a way to force me to submit. And thinking back, the reason I got pregnant in the first place was because Sean Miller used a condom he bought when we were intimate. Since getting engaged, Sean Miller knew that my attitude towards pregnancy was since it's happened, let's just accept it, and he became even more clingy. We were intimate 5 days a week. Thinking about it, Mrs. Miller probably had a hand in it, giving Sean Miller ideas. The more I thought about it, the colder I felt, and the more I regretted misjudging him. I couldn't help myself, and I slapped Sean Miller again. He looked at me, a mixture of regret and annoyance on his face. Joanne, don't say anything. Sean Miller, I misjudged you. I turned to leave, but Mrs. Miller grabbed a handful of my hair. Joanne Miller, how dare you hit my son? My face hardened, and I dug my nails into her palm, the pain making her release my hair involuntarily. In a flash, a burning slap landed on her face. Mrs. Miller immediately quieted down, stammering and unable to speak. Joanne Miller, that's my mom. How could you hit her? What about your mom? Your mom is so cheap. She deserves to be hit. And so do you, big slut and little slut. Sean Miller and Dad Miller were enraged. One raised his cane and the other raised his hand, wanting to teach me a lesson. The last sentence enraged Aunt Susan as well. She thought I was subtly insulting her and her son, and she wanted to rush over and hit me too. The sound of the doorknob turning echoed, and Aunt Susan's son ran to open the door, only to be kicked away along with the door. Son, Which son of a bitch did that? If anything happens to my son, I'll fight you to the death. Loud cries and curses erupted simultaneously. My parents, along with my uncles, cousins, and nephews, kicked down the door and saw the cane about 2 inches from hitting my head and the hand about to land a slap. At just a look from my parents, Sean Miller sheepishly retracted his hand, and they even snatched the cane from Dad Miller and put it aside. Mom, Dad, what are you doing here? My parents snorted coldly. If we hadn't come, our daughter would have been beaten here today. Mrs. Miller started to cry, falsely accusing me with tears streaming down her face. In-laws, you don't know the whole truth. Joanne Miller, look at all the food on this table. She flipped it over. She even called us sluts. We were just trying to teach her a lesson because we couldn't stand it. Anyway, it's all a misunderstanding. My mom frowned, looking impatient. What? Did my daughter say anything wrong? Aren't you sluts? What did you say? Mrs. Miller wanted to get angry, but she shrank back when she saw my mom's muscular cousin standing behind her. Sean Miller sensed that something was wrong and lowered his head, trying to smooth things over. But I avoided his outstretched hand. Let's schedule a time to talk about the engagement. Before leaving, I still heard Mrs. Miller shouting, "Talk, then talk. Son, you schedule a meeting with her in a couple of days." I don't believe she'd really dare to break off the engagement while she's pregnant. The day I went to the hospital to schedule an abortion, I ran into Aunt Susan taking her son to see a doctor. She glared at me resentfully. "Joanne Miller, look at what your family did. They gave my son such a big bump on his forehead. It cost me hundreds of dollars in medical fees, and it's made my child so uncomfortable. I won't let you get away with this. Just wait until you marry my brother. You'll get what's coming to you." I rolled my eyes, took my examination form, and brushed past her. He deserved it. Consider it retribution for his foul mouth. Who told him to be so ill-mannered? You little bitch, what are you saying? During the scuffle, she snatched the examination form from my hand. Seeing the confirmed date for the abortion on the form, her eyes widened. You're here to schedule an abortion? Does my brother know? Who allowed you to get an abortion without his consent? The hospital was crowded, and she was making a lot of noise. I didn't want to argue with her anymore, so I grabbed the examination form and turned to leave. The procedure wasn't as scary or painful as I had imagined. Just like my parents had reassured me, I just went to sleep and woke up. Other than the discomfort in my lower abdomen, similar to when I had my period, I didn't feel anything else. Although I felt a little reluctant and sorry for the baby, some costs shouldn't influence major decisions, and I didn't regret having the abortion. Sean Miller did contact me 2 days after Christmas Eve/Christmas Eve gathering to schedule a meeting. Because my parents were convinced that I needed postpartum recovery even after an abortion, I asked him to come directly to my house. It was strange. The last time we sat so formally in the study was the day Sean Miller came to propose. It had only been half a year. Mrs. Miller still had that nonchalant attitude. I knew Aunt Susan must have told them about what happened at the hospital that day, but she didn't believe that I would actually risk my health to get an abortion. It wasn't until the abortion form and the $60,000 betrothal gift/engagement ring and gifts were neatly placed in front of them that their eyes started to twitch. Especially Sean Miller. He examined the abortion form carefully, over and over again, before finally believing that the baby was gone. "Joanne Miller, did you really abort our baby?" I nodded faintly. I knew that during the 5 years we were together, Sean Miller must have been sincere at some point. He must have been looking forward to this child as well. It was just a pity that I couldn't pretend that nothing had happened and continue to be with him after uncovering all the pretense and the truth. because all of his sincerity and anticipation stemmed from the fact that I was a single daughter from New York with money and connections. From their perspective, that was the best choice to avoid 20 years of struggle. I was utterly disappointed in him and his family. Mrs. Miller was a meticulous person, and she immediately realized that my physical condition wouldn't have allowed me to have a late-term abortion, so she tore the abortion form into pieces and threw them on the table. Who are you trying to fool? Your body couldn't handle a late-term abortion. Just say you don't want to break off the engagement and come back home, sincerely apologize, and my son will naturally welcome you back with open arms. As she said that, she quickly grabbed the $60,000 betrothal gift/engagement ring and gifts. I'll hold on to this money for you. You young people spend money recklessly and don't know how hard it is to earn. I'll keep it for you, so I'll have something to fall back on in case something happens. And Joanne Miller, you should add my son's name to the deed of the new house you bought. When his father and I have time, we'll move in for a while too. And Sean Miller remained silent the entire time. I sneered, hating myself for being blind and falling for such a person, but also grateful that I discovered his true colors before we got married. Knowing that they wouldn't believe me, I took out my medical report. My body couldn't handle it before, but that was a long time ago. After I got pregnant, my physical condition actually improved. And on the day I scheduled the late-term abortion, the examination results showed that the fetus hadn't fully formed yet, so a late-term abortion wasn't necessary. That's how I was able to have a successful abortion. As long as I took good care of my body and followed a strict diet, the damage from the surgery would be minimized. Mrs. Miller and Sean Miller were kicked out of my house. They refused to return the engagement documents worth $100,000, but as soon as they received a lawyer's letter, Mrs. Miller returned the pair of jade bracelet with both hands. However, one corner of the jade bracelet was maliciously damaged. After a lawsuit, she returned the original $60,000 betrothal gift/engagement ring and gifts and added $10,000 in compensation. After the engagement was called off, Sean Miller came to find me every day at first, crying and kneeling at my door. Later, seeing that I wouldn't budge, he went back to his hometown and obediently went on blind dates, planning to find an obedient woman to marry. Unfortunately, the woman he met on the blind date was a scammer who swindled all of Sean Miller's money and ran off to a foreign country. They've caught her now, but the money is gone forever. Because of this, his mom cries day and night at home, and Dad Miller had a heart attack and is living in the hospital on loans. Of course, when I found out about all of I had already recovered and was vacationing in Switzerland.